I will do a very creative, very personalized marketing plan for them that really works for them and something that really feels good, and gets us excited to list. I want to show the property in the best light.
Welcome, everyone, to the Closing Table Podcast, real accounts from real estate professionals, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm your host, Kat Schooler, and today I'm sitting down with real estate agent Lianna Sam. Lianna is with Brookstone Realtors in Troy, Michigan. She's licensed in both Michigan and Florida. And today we talk about Lianna's approach to working with her buyers and her sellers and her pre-marketing techniques for her sellers. We also talk about how she goes above and beyond for her clients and how she's learned to stand her ground, especially when advocating for her clients. Lianna also shares her view on the current real estate market and where she sees the market heading in the next 5 to 10 years. So without further ado, let's dive in and talk to Lianna. Lianna, thank you so much for joining me today. I'd love to kick it off with how you got started in real estate.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I got started in real estate about 6 years ago. And I would say that I just kind of gravitated towards real estate because, even from the time I can remember, my first word was hi. I always loved talking to other people and meeting people. And I would just go to the grocery store with my mom and say hi to everyone that I could. And it made me feel good, and it seemed to make other people happy when I said hi as a little baby. I wasn't even 1 year old yet. So I've always had a heart for other people, and I actually ended up finding my way into the hospitality business and worked in front of the house, back of the house as a chef for many years, and in front of the house. So I became very good at talking to all kinds of people and anticipating their needs and just being in a position where I can provide care to them and treat them well. So, as I got older, real estate became an interest of mine because I knew that it was one of the safest ways to invest your money, and that 90% of all the millionaires out there started in real estate. And so not only that, but it was interesting to me because I never knew anything about investing. I didn't know anything about buying a house, and I just kind of wanted to know how the world worked in terms of, real estate and property and business. And so I was very attracted to the business, and ended up years down the road. The turning point for me was I was able to partner with someone who would get involved in investments with me. So that's kind of how I got my start. And we started flipping properties together. So we're on our 4th property now, and hopefully going to do much more because that is my retirement plan. And I've learned so much from it as well. And I started listing properties right away. I actually worked with more sellers at that time than buyers in the first few years of my career, which is interesting because usually it's the other way around. So I've gotten really good with listing homes and presenting them and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's kind of how I got started.
Oh, very cool. So you started in the kind of the fix and flip and then got licensed to sell those homes? Is that kind of how that works?
Well, the fix and flip opportunities were there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, it just makes sense now. I always thought about getting licensed, but now it makes sense to do it, like actually do it now and make a career switch.
And then you naturally just kind of then started working with clients as well.
Yes, I started to meet a lot of clients. I was already good at meeting lots of new people and talking to people. So I just started to meet a lot of sellers, actually. The environment that I was in and the network that I was in at the time was a great place to meet a lot of people who already owned properties and were well established. So I actually ended up working with a lot of sellers at that time, and it was a great experience for me. And I since then went full time. It's been 4 years that I've been full time, and I've never looked back. It's been one of the greatest career moves that I've ever made.
So It's so interesting that you started in hospitality, because I was actually just talking with someone else, and if listeners, had listened to the previous episode, I had said to I was talking to an agent, Patrick, that I think real estate is actually what you guys do is a hospitality business. And I've spoken to other agents who approach it in much more of a kind of a hospitality way versus sales. And so I just think it's so natural that you have this hospitality background, and it probably fits so nicely into what you do now.
Yeah, it's like I'm still in the hospitality business. Sometimes I feel like I'm a social worker with what I do, honestly, making miracles happen.
That's awesome. So with your clients, when you're having that initial meeting, with your buyers or your sellers, what does that look like for you?
So, whenever I am working with a seller, first I do a 3-point evaluation. I always do a 3-point evaluation, which is basically where I will collect a bunch of data and I will research the property, find out the history, find out if there's any liens, and do a lot of digging on that property to get to know like what's on paper and the area and all this, everything there is to know about that property data wise, and try to determine what is the value based on those things. And then I'll look at it from the perspective of an appraiser. What's an appraiser actually going to look at? They have a book that's like this thick of all the things that they look for. And I don't know every single one of those things, but from working closely with appraisers and having experience now for 6 years, I have a good understanding what a lot of those things are that they look for. And so I'm able to sort of clear the air for my sellers on what is actually adding value to their home and what isn't, which also helps when we talk about getting the home ready to list. What's worth your time and money to do? Is redoing the basement floor going to really add value, or is that going to just cost you time and money and it's not going to really matter to buyers? Things like that, things of that nature. So like adding a shed can be helpful if there's no storage on the property, if there's no basement or no garage. But adding a shed really hardly adds any value to the property. So then we have to have those conversations about, is there enough storage in the home? Would it be a good idea to spend a couple grand and have a nice shed? Because that might really be something that's hindering the sale if there's no storage there. So we just have conversations like that. And then the third point is I will evaluate the property the same way that a prospective buyer would, because the buyers don't necessarily care how the appraisers operate. They're going to look at anything and everything within their price range that's within that same school district, in surrounding cities and areas that they want to be in. So I will evaluate it on all three of those points there, and then come up with a unique, customized marketing plan for that property, because every property is unique. And I understand that every seller has their own unique space, and it means a lot to them. There's also a sentimental value there and an emotional attachment, because maybe that was their first home, and when they got married, or maybe they had a family there. So it's really important to understand the home from their emotionally invested standpoint, and also from a critical, analytical, and buyer's perspective as well, and also the appraisers, so that we know ballpark like what it is important that the house appraises for close to what we price it to, so that a buyer will actually get approved for the loan. So and then with my sellers, I will do a very creative, very personalized marketing plan for them that really works for them, and something that really feels good, and gets us excited to list. I want to show the property in the best light, and I will be very honest and direct with my sellers, and I will point out things that buyers are going to see, and I will help them prepare the home to list. And I will go through, and depending on what my seller wants to do, because if they want to wholesale it for a wholesale price and they don't want to do any repairs and things like that, then we'll work with that. If they want to go for top dollar, then we need to get it top dollar ready. So I will make my list for them of things that they need to take care of, and I will provide all of the resources, any help, any connections that they need, I have in my back pocket. I have plumbers, handymen, landscapers, locksmiths. I have anyone that any services that we could possibly need. I have a whole network of connections that I can fall back on and I can recommend. And then when I do start, what I do is I have my pre-marketing. So we'll have the property listed. It won't be live on the market yet for sale, but we'll do pre-marketing all week long. I do a robust online campaign. I think having an online presence in this day and age is very important. Everybody's online. Everybody's looking at their phones all the time. If your house is not being marketed online in that way, on social medias, Google, anywhere and everywhere that people are looking at homes, like, you're missing a huge audience. So that is a big priority for me. We get everything perfect, everything ready, staging consults if we need to, like anything and everything that needs to be done to get it ready to sell. And then we introduce it to the market, pre-market it so that everyone has time to see it before I hold my open house. And I will run an online campaign all week long so that as many eyes as possible will see the home. Then when I have my open house, I will come early and I will do door knocking and I put my signs out. I get music going. I have all the things like ready to go. I will even do some staging myself. I have a whole bunch of supplies at my house of all kinds of like little beautiful like fake succulent plants and throw pillows and welcome mats and wreaths and all kinds of nice things. And sometimes I will even show up with big baskets of fresh flowers to hang off of the porch. And I really will take control of the situation because you have to realize your clients don't really know these things. And they get so used to stuff that they're used to their clutter and all these little things being around. I will not rest until we move every single little thing. Has to be out of the pictures. Everything has to be put away. No signs of cats and dogs as much as we can, and really make the home, neutral, nice and neutralized so that someone else can envision them living there. And then I make these wonderful little packets for my open house because I noticed early on when I was a new agent and I was doing my open houses, I noticed that like no one really cares about the flyers very much. Like they don't really like pick those up. They already know how much the house is selling for. Like they're already there. They already saw it online. So what I do is I make these comprehensive packets there that have a QR code as well. So if you want to just scan it, it'll pop right up on your phone. So if you don't want the papers, you don't have to take the papers. But a lot of people, they love these property reports that I make. It's like a nice thin little packet. And it's got all of the information about the house that any buyer could possibly want to know. The seller's disclosures are in there. The lot lines are outlined in there, and there's the local schools and their ratings, the restaurants and their Google star rating, the local parks in the area. Sometimes I will include comps. If there is good comps to show, I will. Sometimes there's not a lot of comps, so it just depends. But yeah, so I really go hard on my open houses. I don't just show up with a little flyer. Like I start a week before that with the online promotions and the door knocking, and I invite the neighbors to come and I blast it on my social media, and then I will have a nice presentation when people come into the home. And I've even stayed late many times after my open houses just to stay with buyers and continue walking them through the home. If there were any stragglers and they have questions, I will stay there till the very end to talk with all of them. As far as, okay, so that's the sellers. Mm-hmm. All that is the sellers. As far as buyers go, buyers to me are like precious little babies. Like you just have to take them under your wing and like really just carry them through every step of the way, especially in this market. It is a treacherous place. And this market in the last 2-3 years alone has changed so many times. I can't even count how many times it's changed, like 27 times. It's just changed so many times. It's month by month. It's week by week. It's literally day by day, really. So I don't understand how anyone could possibly know what the heck is going on out there if you're not working with a professional. and someone who has experience and someone who's really boots on the ground. They're doing it all the time and staying up on their research and studying the market every day. And if you have ever done a transaction without a realtor before, I know you missed like 20 important things went under your radar and you just did not know about it. And those things might come back later when there's another transfer of ownership of the property. It might come up later and you'll be like, oh my God, I didn't know anything about this. There's a lot to know. And there's so much to know that, there are a lot of agents out there who feel like it's the buyer's responsibility to do their own homework and educate themselves, which is true. But it's like, how do you even do that? How do you even do the homework when you don't even know what you need to know? Like, you didn't even know that you needed to know that or ask those questions. So the very first thing I do with my buyers is we have a buyer consultation, and I have a whole presentation prepared for them where I will educate them on a lot of common pitfalls, things to watch out for, a lot of mistakes that buyers tend to make. And I also set their expectation. I tell them what's going on in the market. I tell them about the limited inventory. And I tell them that about market trends and the behaviors out there so that we know what we're competing with and that there's no scary surprises. I will also I will show them what the offer looks like. We'll go through the offer. We'll go through our contracts. We'll go through every piece of paperwork that goes along with this process so that they know up front, like, what is an earnest money deposit? What are concessions? How does this work? When is the appraisal? Like, things like that. So I will explain the whole process from beginning to end. And what I like to do is just set them up with some recommendations because there's some lenders out there who, if you don't know any better, you might just be on Google and find a lender you just clicked on their ad, and they're based in Kentucky. They are not a brick and mortar. They're a cloud-based company. They don't have, maybe they're not like anyone that anyone's ever heard of. And maybe they don't have a lot of creativity and things that they can do for you, and they don't really know the market, your local market. And believe it or not, that is something that can actually make or break your offer being accepted. Because if the seller and the seller's agent look at your offer and they're like, I never heard of this lender. Where is this lender? It's not even based in Michigan or Florida. I'm actually a licensed realtor in Florida as well, in Fort Lauderdale is my area. But if you don't have a local reputable company, a lot of times people will get sketched out and not choose your offer for something like that, even though that lender might be a great lender. So it's very, very important. And not only that, there's so many different loan options now. And I like to keep a variety in my back pocket. So when you get in this business, all the lenders that are out there, they want to build a relationship with you, like, as soon as possible, because they want you to just send them all their business. And so they want to build rapport with you. And they want to provide some sort of value. I really am very selective and choosy when I choose which lenders to work with, because for me, it's cool to like click with that person and get along with them and feel like you're buddies or whatever, but it's so much more important to me that they're offering something of value to my clients. And clients' needs are so different. Every client has different wants and needs. So the lenders that I keep in my back pocket that I like to recommend, they're all very different from each other. I don't have like all the same stuff and there's like 4 different people and they all do the same things. They're all so different. So there really isn't a right or wrong one to choose. It's just about knowing what are your real estate goals and who's the best person to help you achieve that. A lot of buyers will go to the bank or their credit union. They'll go usually to that place is like the first place they think to go to inquire about a loan. And that's another thing that I always recommend, that they go with a company that actually specializes in mortgages, because the banks and the credit unions, they do hundreds of loans and they only have a certain mold that they want everyone to fit in. And if you can't fit into that mold, then there's all kinds of red flags that get raised. You could get a subprime loan, maybe a higher interest rate that's not really working out for your best interest. And so if you work sometimes with a smaller company or someone that specializes in mortgages, they can get creative for you and really design like a type of loan for you that makes more sense, that has fees that you can afford, and possibly, the bank might have approved you for FHA, but now we have you with a lender that can get creative and has more flexibility, and now you have a conventional loan, which is so much better than a subprime loan to shop around with in a competitive market. So my buyers, I just right from the start, they know with me that I'm going to take care of them. I'm looking out for them. I'm warning them about things. I'm setting their expectations. And then we will get started on our search. And I try to always put their needs their needs are the priority. The wants is something, those are like things that I also try to get for them, but it is a very limited market, so it can be challenging. But the experience I think that we have together working as with me as a buyer, I would say that we actually have a lot of fun. And I do anticipate their needs, even down to just bringing like snacks and water bottles when we're like out for long days of showings, because I know it can be kind of grueling and exhausting. And sometimes, like, if we have a lot to get done in one day and I have a buyer that's very active and wants to see a lot of homes, then I'm like, okay, I'm bringing the snacks. Like, we're going to keep on going and not have to stop, Currently, my record is 15 houses in one day.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot. And I'm willing to go as hard as my client is. So if my client only wants to see 3 homes and then they're exhausted, that's totally fine. We can call it a day and we can start again tomorrow or the next day. I really have dedicated myself so much to the service that I give. I don't have kids. I don't have dogs or cats or anything like that. And I prioritize my health. I take very good care of myself. So even in the winter months, I hardly ever get sick. I'm always ready to go. Whenever my clients are ready to go, I'm ready to hit the streets. So as far as buyers go, I think we have a really good time together. And I noticed that they get a lot of emotional support from me too, which is something that I think is just inherent of the business in a way, especially if you're a realtor who is very caring. It's the nature of the business. They might only do this once, twice, maybe 3 times in their whole life. I'm doing it several times a year with all different kinds of people. And so I know that there'll be another house. I know that we're going to get through this. I know that they're going to find the right one and that the planets are going to align and it's going to work out the way it's meant to. And so I'm able to keep that positivity going and bring that good energy into things when the going gets tough. I feel like I really carry them through to keep on going, because sometimes they get discouraged or heartbroken or they feel like giving up, and I'm just keep pushing them and I say, no, don't give up. Like, we got this. We're going to make it through. And then I facilitate the entire transaction. We're always thinking 2 steps ahead, always strategizing when it comes to negotiating, and just every aspect of the sale from beginning to end. Even when after we close, I'm still checking in on them because they have to make it to the tax office within 45 days to register their property with the city. And so these are things I'm reminding them of. If their home warranty is kicked in, then sometimes there's like some companies will offer free incentives. So I'll always like mark that down in my notes. So if it's been a year and they still have, I'll keep a copy of their home inspection. And like there was one company that would do that. It was a home warranty company where they would offer the 2nd year free if you still had a copy of your home inspection.
Oh.
So whenever clients would go with that company, I would keep, as a courtesy for them, keep a copy of that. And I would remind them a year later and say, hey, I have a copy of this in case you don't you want a 2nd year free? And so really building the relationship and really taking care of them even after the transaction is over is all part of the way that I operate in my business.
Yeah, it's so above and beyond. And oh gosh, I'm sure people just can't get enough of it, right? I mean, I would love someone to take care of me like that.
I always think that my first time home buyers don't really know how good they have it with me because there's a lot of realtors who really do have that approach where they're just like, hey, this is on you to figure this stuff out and learn it. And it is. It's not wrong to be that way, but the type of person that I am, I want to. I want to do this. I want to help people, and I want them to be educated on the things that they don't know, because this is the single most important decision that they may ever make in their life. And this decision, every small decision is going to add up and have the domino effect on the rest of their life. Their future it's a decision today, but it affects the whole rest of their life. So I'm very, very dedicated to being a part of it. I really like it. I really like doing it.
I'm curious, with your license in Florida, was that something you proactively were I know the trope is that Michiganders retire in Florida, or was that something you were seeing from people coming to you and being like, oh, I love working with you. I'd like to buy a house in Florida. Can you help me? How did you come to that decision?
So I actually ended up getting licensed in Florida and really focusing on the southeastern side of Florida, where Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, and Broward County is where I know really well, because I actually lived there for almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
So I know that area very, very well, and I already have a network down there. I have lots of friends, and I know tons of people. So it just made sense for me to also get licensed there as well as Michigan, because now I've been in Michigan for about 8 years. So,
and we all moved to Florida when we retired.
Yes, and usually it's actually to the West Coast that a lot of people in Michigan go. So I have my connections and my referrals out there, so I can always assist with that as well. But for me, I know the East Side best, and I really specialize in the East Side. But there are a lot of people in Michigan that go to Fort Lauderdale too, so it does end up working out in both ways for me. It's awesome.
Totally. So do you have any memorable client stories you'd like to share?
Sure. There's a couple that come to mind. Well, actually, speaking of Florida, so there was a home that I sold in Florida, and it was in a neighborhood that I grew up in and I knew very well. And so when I was evaluating the property, at the time, the market was crazy. This is when interest rates were very low. And so I evaluated the home, and the reality of it was that we couldn't realistically expect that this home would appraise for more than $550. And that was also pushing it. But because I knew that this neighborhood was a very sought after community, a very coveted neighborhood, and because I knew that neighborhood so well, I knew that that particular home wasn't comparable to the other homes that were in the neighborhood, and that it was a bigger property. It had larger bedrooms. It had more backyard. There was a lot of high-end finishes in the home. There was just a lot of things about it that really deserved to be noted and featured. And so with the way that the market was behaving at that time, I said, even though this is maybe a little crazy, but let's just shoot for the stars. Let's just go for a good price here. So we did. We listed it for $550, and that was very high. That was the highest anything with data that we could find. That was the highest thing that we could possibly shoot for. And I didn't even I think that realistically, this home, between us, this home should have sold for $525, maybe $530. So $550 was kind of a long shot, but being that I understood the way the market was and I understood what was so great about this particular home in this particular community, I was like, let's go for it. So we listed it, and we started the pre-marketing. So before it was actually live on the market, I got a phone call from a, a competing realtor company that they would farm that neighborhood. And they were pissed. They were like, how did you get this listing? They were jealous. And they were like, you're crazy listing it for 550. That's over and above like anything that's sold in here. And they were kind of not very nice about it. And whatever. So that was weird. And then about within a week, sure enough, we had multiple offers, and one of them was for 575. It was 25 grand over our asking price, and I was able to secure that for them. They had excellent financing. These were really great buyers. I vetted them, and I got them to agree to a full appraisal guarantee because I knew this house would never appraise. And sure enough, we had a quick closing, and it worked out great. It was amazing. And if that other realtors out there that called me that was kind of not so nice, you're welcome, because I just brought that whole neighborhood up. That one sale just kick-started like all the values to skyrocket in that community.
Wow.
So that was a really cool story that I liked. I do have another seller story that sticks out to me. This was in Michigan, and this was in a historical village where the properties were very charming and very sought after. And what we did was, when I showed up to this property, I met with the seller, and the seller told me he wanted top dollar for the home. And the condition of the home at that time was, it was far from being ready to list for top dollar. And him and I went through it together, spent a lot of time with my seller, and which was nice because we got along. And we went through everything together. I made a very long, lengthy list of everything that I wanted him to do. And I would periodically check back. I would come to the house, see the progress myself from my own eyes, kind of, reposition, see where we're at. And I was able to provide many services and professionals, people that I have in my back pocket to assist with getting the home prepared to sell. And it took a few months, but I was very proud of my seller because he did everything I asked him to do. And it's such a blessing to have that experience, because sometimes people don't want to do what you ask them to do, and that's okay too. But as long as the way we're marketing it and pricing it is reflecting the condition that it's in, then that's fine. So this was a great experience for me working with him. We got the home prepared to list. I did a beautiful virtual tour, a video with nice music and everything that I edited myself and put it all together. We had a pre-marketing campaign. I had one of the biggest, busiest open houses that I ever had. I door knocked for that one too. I had my packets. I had all my things ready to go. And I toasted some cinnamon sticks, got it smelling all nice. And everyone came in. There was about 35 to 40 people.
Nice.
So it was a very busy open house. And one thing I wanted to add is, before we listed the home, right before, now we had already decided what our price was going to be. And because I was so closely watching the market right up until, and I do this with every seller, right up until that very moment that I'm about to click that button to put the property online, I will check the market like right up until that very last second, because it just so happened the day before we went on the market, another property had closed. And this meant that we could pony up to that price and jack up the price now. And we went for it. I said, let's do it. Like, let's go for it. And we added about 30 grand to our purchase price that we originally were thinking. So that was a great move. So I think that's something that could have been easily overlooked That could have been such a major oversight, something, just that one detail. Like if your agent isn't checking right up until the moment before you actually publish the listing, you should make sure that like the market is still the same. I mean, it does change by day. So you should be checking the data, you should be checking the market. So we ended up listing for significantly higher on a whim, just like that. And we had a great open house. We got multiple offers soon after. And this deal ended up taking a turn. It took a major turn. There was a curveball that none of us were expecting. So a lot of sellers, they don't really know anything about maintaining their sewer lines. And this was a very old home. So the buyer came along and did a sewer scope inspection, and we found that there were many blockages. So the seller agreed to have the blockages cleared, and we could only get so far with that. I mean, we had made it out. The property had about half an acre, so we had made it out. There was a lot of frontage. We had made it out about, I want to say, around 30 feet out, and they were hitting blockages that the hydro jets and cutters just could not break through. And for all we know, and we suspected, that the line actually went underneath the street and connected, tied in on the opposite end of the street. So there was potentially easily another 20 to 30 feet of sewer line that who knows what was going on down there. Like, now, if you guys don't know anything about that, that's actually is potentially a $25,000 problem. I mean, that could easily have been 30 grand for all we know. And so for the buyer for us to run into this now, when everything's going so well, was a major curveball. And, you know, we're hoping that this isn't going to kill the deal, because this is a huge thing, you know. Now, even though the house, the water pressure was fine, there was no issues with the plumbing whatsoever. The operation of the plumbing seemed to be fine. But it still is something that could end up causing issues, and it's not something that you could just leave like that, because the ground can get soft. I mean, this can affect your property in a lot of ways. So at this point now, after talking to several professionals, having people come out, they felt like the best thing that they could do was maybe add a tie-in. It was going to be like $10,000 for them to dig down at the corner end of the property to add like a tee in to that section of the pipe, so they could try to get it from another angle and continue. But by this point in time, you know, my seller had already, I feel like he had already done his due diligence on it, as well as the buyer. And I feel like he already sort of did his part respectively to take care of any of the blockages for them, and we got as far as we could. Now we're looking at 10 grand for this, and that's not going to be the end of it, because then it needs to be cleared again. And if it doesn't come clear and it's broken anywhere in that line, we're still dealing with a $25,000-$30,000 thing. So now we're looking at a $10,000 tee-in and a $20,000 to $30,000 potential. And you know what? I had to just, at this point in my career, this was a great experience for me and a learning lesson, but I really had to just kind of get tough and kind of call their bluff and just say, you know what? This is it. If you guys want the house, you know, take it. My seller's willing to give you a small credit for this. It was like, wouldn't even cover like barely any of the unknowns that could be there. But we said, look, if you want this house, like, and we really were, I was nervous because I did not want the buyer to back out. I really didn't want to take that risk, but I did. I gave them the ultimatum, and I was like, look, this is what it is. We did our best. You want the house or you don't want the house. And I also knew that was a shot worth taking, because not only did we have plenty of backup buyers, but I knew from studying the neighborhood that this was kind of an issue for a lot of homes in the neighborhood. So good luck was kind of like the vibe, you know? I was like, if you want to live here, you know, at least we know that the basement of this home is good. It's not leaking. It has a warranty. It's got a new drain system. My seller has done so much. This house is worth a lot. And we had to, at some point, like, just get this to the closing table. I wanted my seller not to be stressing over this anymore. So I got real big and brave, and I got tough, and I just said, take it or leave it. And you know what? They took it. They took it, and we closed. Everybody was happy, and it was a great success, and it was a great experience for everyone involved. So that was another great story. And I do have one more.
Go for it.
That I really loved, because those were two seller stories. So now I want to tell you a buyer story. So I had a lovely young couple that I was working with, first-time home buyers. And of course, I took them under my wing, showed them everything, took care of them from start to finish. And they had a laundry list of things. They wanted it all. I mean, they wanted a house with a lot of square footage. They wanted a garage. They wanted a basement. They wanted property, like a big property. They wanted good schools. They wanted a nice area. They wanted it all. And they had a first-time home buyer budget. So you can imagine, like, that this was definitely going to be a challenge for me.
You know what that feels like.
And I don't blame them for wanting it all, you know, of course. But it definitely was a challenge, being with the inventory that's so limited. So we looked, and there were times where they would feel a little discouraged. It was very tough. And then when we would find something that could have maybe worked, of course, there were 30 other buyers jumping on it. So one day when I was just on my own free time, I was kind of looking for them. And I was like, man, there's got to be something. I got to find something, you know, and I'm getting creative with my parameters, thinking a little outside the box. I'm trying to, like, see the potential, you know, with some things. And so I'm looking for them, and I find this one house that seems to check damn near all their boxes. So I said, let's go see this one. So we see it, and they thought it was great. So we write the offer, we send it in, and we went back and forth with the sellers a few times, ended up getting our foot in the door, 10 grand under asking price. And then after home inspections and negotiations, I was able to talk them into the sellers into doing, like, some work and some repairs to the home that we felt were very important and critical before my buyers could move in. So we got those concerns and those things addressed. The sellers, we got them to agree to do it. And I also was able to score them an additional $11,600 in credits on top of that, which we were able to work with the seller on getting some of those in the form of concessions, which directly affected how much they were going to need to bring to closing, you see. So it kept a lot of money in their pockets directly. So it was definitely a difference that they could feel. You know, sometimes $5,000, a difference in purchase price of $5,000, it's a $5,000 credit in the form of purchase price is only going to change your mortgage payment like this much. But if you can get it in the form of a credit of, like, a seller's concession, then it can be applied towards your prepaids and escrows and closing costs and your down payment. So that really puts some money back in their pockets. And I'm just so happy for them. They bought a home in a really great area, great schools, and they've already done so much work to it. They already have, and it appraised for more than so there was just a touch of instant equity. It was the perfect cherry on top of the sundae. It was just a really great experience. And I cannot tell you, and my buyers, if you're watching this, like, you have no idea how many times that deal almost fell apart. Oh my gosh. Like, it was all I could do to work with the other agent to just get this, like, to close the gap, like, make this happen, like, get this to the closing table, because I couldn't think about them losing this house. It was just too good. And we already had our foot in the door. So we just had to make it to the closing table. And it all worked out in the end. And I know that it's already been worth it for them because they already have equity, and the area that they're in, they're just going to continue to grow that equity, and they're going to generate that wealth. And they are planning on having a family, and they'll be able to pass that down to their family one day is a really like monumental moment in their lives and in mine too. I was happy to be a part of it.
Oh gosh, you love hearing stories like that. So, what would you say is one of the biggest lessons you've learned since beginning your real estate career?
Well, I would say for me personally, I learned very early on that this business is not for the weak. And I really needed to toughen up a lot if I was going to do this long term. And that was my plan. And once I started learning and getting really into real estate even more, I began to become like even more interested in it. So it wasn't something that I ever at any point in time was like, oh, I can't do this or no. I just knew like I had to toughen up. I really did because it's very it can be very emotional. It can be very, very tough. It's a grueling process. It's mentally the it's like your mind is on a like a marathon, to get from the very beginning of this all the way to the end. Sometimes it's a whole year, sometimes it's over a year. And then when you're down into the nitty gritty of it, when you're in the intense period of negotiations, I that's probably the biggest lesson for me was just being tough and knowing how to also just stand up, stick up for your clients and be headstrong about their needs and putting them first and also being direct. Don't beat around the bush. I don't beat around the bush with any of my clients. I'm very direct with them and I do it in a way that's tactful and in a way that I can explain so that it makes sense of why I'm saying these things. I'll be very direct with my clients and I will point out structural issues with the home. I will point out things that they should be aware of. And I will point out things too about their loans and about their interest rates. Now, these things are my client's personal business. And I always tell every client that your financial business is your own business. It's not mine. As a realtor, my job is to facilitate the transaction, help you find a home and close on it and to negotiate for you. But my clients very quickly realize and feel that this is a safe space with me and they want me to know what's going on with their lender and with their finances because they want my professional and my expertise, like they want my expert eyes on it so that I can find out like, hey, why are your fees so much? Like, what's your lender doing with this? Why are, and let's see if we can get those numbers down and, So the other thing about being tough too is just being able to call people's bluff and say like, put up or shut up, like, like you're buying this house or you're not, and with sellers, talking about like to their buyers, like you're either taking the house or you're not, and sometimes it is what it is, and you just have to get tough like that, and there's no more nickel and diming over things. We have to just get it done, and somebody has to take that stance. So I will take that stance. And not only that, but standing up to other agents too, because there's a lot of agents that will get nasty with you or they'll try to tell you things that are just not right at all. And I don't take shit from anybody. So I've learned how to stand up against these people. Well, stand up to these people, not against them, because we're not against each other. We're actually I'm always focused on my clients and doing what's best for them, even if it means I'm working with an agent that's not working well with me. That's just the reality of the business. But I have a very strong backbone and I don't take any crap from anybody. And I have had to tell some other realtors, like, what's up? I had to tell them, like, and they've been very good life lessons for me that have translated into many aspects of my life. So that is one really valuable lesson that I've learned. And another lesson, this is just a quick one. Like, this is just for like rookie agents out there. Just a piece of advice. If you're a brand new agent, one of my best pieces of advice that I can give that I've learned the hard way is if you're talking to people about what their home is worth, always let them answer you first. Everybody has a number in their minds of how much they think their home is worth. They always do. And they might have like a ballpark idea, maybe nothing concrete, but they always have a number in mind. And you always want them to say it first. Now, a lot of times they'll say, Lianna, what do you think my house is worth? And I will just say, well, I have kind of an idea. Even I have a great idea. I have a really good idea. I already know. I did all my homework. But I just say, I have a good idea. What do you think it's worth? And I always put the question back on them, and I will not answer it unless they answer it first. Because I learned the hard way that if you answer it first and that number is insulting to them, they're not willing to listen at that point. Of how you arrived at that number, they're just flabbergasted. That's not always the reaction you get, but it can happen. And so even if you're talking to people who aren't ready to list their home right now, I had one woman, she was saying, what do you think my home is worth? And I said, well, what do you think it's worth? And I already knew in my mind that it was worth maybe 285, 290. She said, oh, I think it's worth like 300. So I knew that she wasn't ready to list her home anytime soon. We were just having a conversation. That wasn't the appropriate time for me to say, hey, here's all my data, and this is why it's only worth this much, and let's talk about pricing strategies. Like, that's a conversation you have when you're going to list a property. But since I knew that she wasn't listing anytime soon, I just said, you know what? Yeah, you do have a pretty good idea. You're not too far off. You're in the right ballpark. And she loved hearing that from me, and that helped us build that a stronger connection and relationship. And I know that she is going to contact me one day when it is time to list her home. And the reality is 6 months from now, her home will be worth $10,000 anyway. Like, so it wasn't worth like ruffling any feathers.
Have you ever had anyone be like very, very off, and then how have you had to handle kind of that awkwardness?
Yes, I have. I have early in my career as a rookie where I made that mistake of like blurting it out and then them being like appalled that the number was so much lower than they thought. So that was how I learned my lesson, not to do that anymore. But when I do have that conversation, because you have to have that conversation, and sometimes it's not an easy conversation and it's not what the sellers want to hear, but we have to talk about it because it's business. So when we do have those conversations, I come very prepared to show them. I bring them concrete evidence, things that they can see for themselves so that they can understand. And sometimes that may even involve, I did take one seller of mine on showings with me because I said, you need to see what's out there because you haven't been in the market in years and you need to know what you're competing with and how these houses measure up to yours. And the best way you can know that is by seeing it. So there are a lot of times where I'll go by myself and I'll go to other competing homes in the area for my own research. But there was a time where I did bring a seller with me, and I would do that again in the future if I felt like it was necessary for my seller to see. But I present them with tons of information, irrefutable data and evidence so that they could see for themselves where they really fall. And then we can be honest and we can have a good conversation about going forward and what can we do to put more money in their pocket and what are some of the ways that we can list it or present it in its best light so that we can get closer to the number that they need to be at. And I will come with proposals and I will come with estimated seller proceeds worksheets so that we can really see what their closing costs and everything is going to cost, and including upgrades, remodels. We'll talk about what upgrades are worth doing and what isn't. And so it's not a scary conversation to really have anymore at this point in my career because I know it's just part of the process.
For sure. And then, Lianna, is there anything you're looking forward to for the rest of the year? It doesn't have to be real estate related.
I'm definitely looking forward to the election, but also not looking forward to it. I'm not really sure. Like, it'll be interesting to see just how the market changes and what the Fed's going to do with interest rates. There's a lot of myths out there right now about the market crashing or about buyer's agents' commissions not being paid anymore, all this crazy stuff because the media just blows things out of proportion. If you're not talking to someone in the business all the time, you really have no idea what to believe. And the market is not crashing anytime soon. Well, for argument's sake, one could say it's already crashed. This is the crash. Like this is in 2007 and 2008, the market crashed and people were upside down in their homes. They were approving people for loans that didn't qualify for loans. They didn't have restrictions on the industry. Appraisals were all crazy all over the place. And it wasn't very regulated. So they were approving people who couldn't afford the mortgage to buy a home. And then when interest rates went up, everybody was upside down. No one could afford their payment. There was a surplus of homes hit the market, short sales, foreclosures, all these homes hit the market. And so around 2010, the building of new properties completely stopped. I mean, it slowed down so much because there was a surplus of homes. So there's always supposed to be a 6-month supply of housing. It's a part of the absorption rate. And this is basically what it means is that the production of new homes is keeping up with the growing population to keep up with the demand. So we've actually been in a deficit now since the crash in 2007 and 2008 has led us to this market that we have now because all of the production of new homes has slowed down. So we've actually been in a shortage for over 10 years now. For 14 years, we've been in a shortage. But we just didn't feel it or really notice it until it got to a point where we had this real estate anomaly where COVID happened. Everything was shut down for months. People were home from school. People were home from work. They were starting to realize, oh my God, we don't have enough room here for all of us. We need to move out of our home. People went back to work, realized that they were going to work from home now, need an office space. Not only that, but then interest rates being record low at 2%, 3% to get a loan to buy property. Oh my gosh, that was just the perfect storm to create a ton of buyer demand. Like tons of buyers showed up on the market, and then everyone had a very rude awakening at that time to realize, oh my gosh, there hasn't been enough houses for us in the last 10 years. There hasn't been enough homes. And now we're really feeling this now. And I'm telling you what, guys, one day this is going to be over. One day there will be enough homes to go around. They're going to increase the production, and I think it's going to take at least 5 years. It could take 10 years. I mean, we're so far behind. For them to catch up, it's going to take more than just a bunch of private, like small builders, even large builders. We need, I think, maybe even the government or the president or someone to allocate funds and do projects where we are putting up housing for people, because it is that much of an issue. And until that starts happening, it's going to be a very long time till we can catch up. The production has increased since then, but the material and the cost of building new homes, it's not even really helping that many people, because there's so many people that need a home in the $200,000 price range, and you just can't even build a home for that price that's 1,000 square feet or bigger. So it's going to be a very long time before any of this changes. And one day it will. And in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whenever it is changed and that balance has been restored, and now we're going back to seeing homes appreciate at 2 to 4% per year like they always have. I mean, we've seen since 2019 in the state of Michigan, it's gone up 45%, or 44.68 or something like that, to be more specific. But it's gone up about 45% in equity, all the properties. And so that's a lot in a very short time. And then it's sort of, once the interest rates went higher, it sort of reeled it in. It kind of brought things back down to planet Earth, so to speak, when sellers were shooting for the stars with their prices. So then the market sort of regulated, and the equity was building at that time in Michigan at around 15%. This was like 2022. And then now it's down to about 10 to 11% year over year in our current market here in Michigan, which is still a lot. I mean, that is still like 4 times the rate of building equity that it always was prior to the crisis, the housing crisis. So I'm, I'm looking forward actually to these next few years. I'm looking at helping as many people as I can while we're in this, because this right now is the opportunity. So many people are afraid right now and they're running away and they're saying, this is such a bad time. This is such a bad time. A little do they know, this is one of the most opportunistic times to be a buyer or a seller and to be an investor, to fix, to flip, to buy and hold long-term rentals, short-term rentals, buying vacant land. You need to have an understanding of location, right, with vacant land, and understanding how that could be an up-and-coming area, the potential to grow. There's so many ways to take advantage of this market that we're in now. And in 5-10 years from now, whenever it is over, we're going to be looking back on it and we're going to say, wow, you know what? That was a really opportunistic time to be buying and flipping and buying and holding and just making real estate moves. That was it. That was the time, because now it's stale and back to normal. It's going to take us 20 years to build the equity. So I think that's pretty much like what I would, what I'm kind of looking forward to. But it also is reassuring for, I think, a lot of people to hear it, because there's a lot of people who are scared right now. They're scared and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to sell right now before anything changes, which is great. It's good to sell when it's high and strike while the iron is hot, because you never know as a seller. But as a buyer too, I mean, don't be afraid to invest. You're not going to be upside down in your home. There's always going to be somebody who's chomping at the bit for that house. There's not enough homes to go around. And as long as there's, I think one of the statistics that the National Association had was, this was in 2022. They said that there were 33 buyers for every listing.
Wow.
Ouch. So until that number even remotely, now there's foreclosures on the horizon. People are talking about this, and the 2-for-1 buy downs. I know about some of the trends right now. And one of the trends right now is the 2-for-1 buy down. So this is when you use sellers' concessions to buy down the interest rate, but this only buys it down for the first couple of years, and then it will go back up to whatever that current interest rate is. Now, the idea of this is that it helps the buyers get their foot in the door, and we're hoping that in a couple years from now, the interest rate will be lower than what it is now, so that when they go right into their new interest rate, that it's still an affordable mortgage payment for them. This is a huge question mark for me. Where is this going to take us in a couple years from now? Because that's the current trend right now. You have all these people doing 2-for-1 buy downs, and I always tell my buyers, I say, look, the 2-for-1 buy down is great, but I want you guys to make sure that if this interest rate goes up in 2 years from now, when this incentive wears off, I want to make sure you can afford that payment. And I'm totally on board with asking the seller to give us concessions to do the 2-for-1 buy down, but I don't want to set my buyers up for failure. I don't want them to be in foreclosure, or they're not going to be in foreclosure, because I'm going to call them. I'm going to say, let's sell this house because you have equity. So no one should be foreclosing on their property. But that is a big question mark. And we could see a lot of people in a couple years from now, if the interest rate hasn't gotten lower, we could see some foreclosures coming to the market. Now, mind you, the foreclosures that are on the horizon right now, we would need at least like $6 million to even move the needle. I mean, so guys, don't get too excited for the market crash. It's not going to be like, you're not going to be able to buy a house for 50 grand or 30 grand again. That's not going to happen, because there's just still is too much demand. There's still so many people. It would actually, it would be sad for all those people going into foreclosure, but it would actually be like just a drop of relief in this housing drought that all of these buyers are, demanding and looking for homes.
Well, Lianna, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom, sharing your time with us today. How can people find you so that they can work with you?
You guys can call me. All my information's online. My phone number it's still a Florida number, because I'm back and forth, 954-647-1046. I have a website, Lianna Sam, it's brookstone.liannasam.com. And I also have Facebook page at Homes by Lee. And you can also search me on Google. I have my Google businesses posted, all 5-star reviews. And so you could check me out there. And yeah, those are the ways to.
Awesome. We'll link it
contact
all
me.
in the show notes so people are just a click away
Cool.
from finding you. Thank you so much again.
Thank you too. Thank you so much. It was great to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Closing Table podcast, brought to you by WindowStill. I'm Kat Schooler. Please be sure you're following our podcast on Apple and Spotify, and if you're part of our YouTube audience, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a comment or review. It helps us find more amazing listeners like you.